Okay, so Fantasy Football Beginner's Guide. 7 Secrets to League Wins. In your fantasy league on Yahoo, the first thing you want to look for is waiver wire players.
Where's the video? Oh, it is? Sorry.
You messed it up. You can't interrupt me. I just told you that. Really? Okay, once again, back on live at the YouTube channel that I have here, and I'm doing a weekly summary just specifically for fantasy football beginners. And in this guide here, this is instruction that I'll give you 7 secrets to winning leagues. And as you can see so far here, in my particular league on Yahoo, where I play with friends, which is always fun, and you can't lose that way unless you're playing for money. So, as you can see, my record here is at the top, as I do every year. Points for, you can achieve this kind of result. I'll show you how by doing some really simple things in your fantasy league. See 742 points. And the top for this coming week projected, this is what Yahoo's algorithm for projections comes out to, that I have the top points this coming week as well versus my opponent, of course. So getting into the first secret to winning your fantasy league to help you dominate is waiver wire players. Now, waiver wire players can either be someone that was dropped by another team, in which can work to your advantage in picking them up, from getting them from another team, and then using them against, which is always fun to do against a team that dropped that player. So getting good results from those is always good. But it can also be players that have never been drafted or picked up before, so which would include waiver wire players. And of course, to look for them, you would just come to players, click there, and let's start taking a look at what I look for. So I look for top fantasy points, fan points. This is a scoring system that whatever league you'll use or you're in, as long as you're playing on Yahoo, then you'll be able to project which players are scoring the most points. Obviously, starting with quarterback, or you can filter this. Let's say you need a running back. Then you go ahead and filter the results, see what you get. It's already taken into consideration. For example, here, this is a half-point PPR league, so it always takes those things into account, the scoring of your particular league. So here you have the most points scored out of the free agents or waiver wires is Terrence West, followed by LeGarrette Blount, who look as a considerable option this week if you're needing or looking at getting a red zone, as I'll get into a little bit, just in a bit, red zone touchdown for a sleeper player, Shane Vereen, and so on. So there are some interesting options there. And I particularly like even Chris Ivory, if they continue to split the load of carries between him and Fournette. That's another interesting scenario. He's playing his old team, the Jets. Okay. So next, I actually want to back up here, still on our waiver wire players secret, is that you want to look at the top performers. Actually, the players dropped. That's what I was looking for. Players dropped. Let's look at transactions just to see who was recently picked up and dropped. Summary. In a league going on right now, live. So we do have defensive players in this league, which makes it a nice league that it includes everybody, all players in the league. So we get a nice, well-rounded experience from this, as we have now for years. But as you can see, Marquise Lee was dropped. He's a player that is getting some targets, I believe, but he's sort of behind Allen Hurns, and well, without Allen Robinson, he's probably the second receiver, so it's not a bad pickup. Who else do we have here? And I'm just looking for anybody who's interesting as far as getting some playing time coming up, or that I projected out to be a good player over, over through the course of the year. As I see here, Gio Bernard was dropped. So that's another interesting PPR pickup, because he wasn't in the list of the players prior to that on the fan points list. So, but he's still an interesting pickup. Okay. Then we want to look at average points per game. See, because average points per game, as we go back to our players, our options for this week, our waiver wire, excuse me, and seeing that, let's see, is something that is actually not on this format. We have fantasy points, but not points per game. So in order to pick that up, well, I do have a tool that I use which I can easily sort through. That's called the Draft Dashboard. You can go and get a free trial for this at dfsfreereport.com. Go ahead and opt into that list to receive a free report on fantasy, along with a trial of just $1 on this particular program here. So it comes up with the algorithm. The algorithm is very important. Anytime you have you're in business or in an organization, the principle that you rely on to build an algorithm for the most important statistics in your company or organization is very important. So similar to that, an algorithm that you have, that you finally decide on, as this takes years of preparation and sorting out with computers, or like we see here, computer rankings. The algorithm is a set of standards that you use to be able to rank your top players of the week. And this is a main tool that I use to be able to do so. So as we can see here, I do have here within my possession the average points per game. As we see here, Christian McCaffrey's at fantasy points per game, 14.9. We have Sterling Shepard, surprisingly, averaging more points even than Christian McCaffrey. These players all have optimal matchups of the week. So the points scored against on a particular fantasy defense, in this case being New England. New England's a bad defense this year so far, provides this player an optimal chance to get his optimal points. So let's consider his 24-point ceiling to perhaps be met this week. And the same may go for even Sterling Shepard against Tampa Bay, being the far worst of any team against receivers and allowing fantasy points. So we have some good options here that are low cost. They can put in your lineups, and even showing here that at 457, and especially Shepard, per fantasy point on DraftKings, because I have it set right now on DraftKings. If you want to play there, sign up for daily fantasy. You don't have to obviously play with the same team or be stuck with that team. You can switch out your players week by week and compete in that way. There are many free contests. So at 324, as you can see on down the list, is a very good option and a value pick. Even in that range, we can look at Golden Tate as an optimal matchup, the 31st ranked opponent versus the wide receiver position at fantasy. So you see how this is already all broken down, that is, an algorithm for you on either DraftKings or to the right of that, FanDuel, so that you can proceed to have a most valuable algorithm ranking. And so you can watch the players that you're going to target, and you can sort them in lists, and easily, just within minutes, make your own rankings that way. And according to, as mentioned, fantasy points per game, and you can look at here, either target, receiving per game, and rushing attempts per game. These are all opportunities that a running back and receiver need to be able to produce in fantasy. So keep these factors in mind because they're difficult to look at, as you can see, with the actual those statistics being here don't seem to be here. All right, so that's the third secret is keeping player options open. Now, if you know your players' past performances in prior years or know football well enough to have a grip on who will pick up their performance, stay with your guys. Don't drop the guy. Because the moment you drop somebody, as mentioned earlier, someone else can pick him up and be very useful to that player in racking up points against you. So be careful with this. If you want to get a good idea of good player rankings right now, just taking you over here to my own site. This will help you out as a beginner, of course. And once you're at Wealthy Fantasy Football, you can go to Fantasy Football Draft Board. So that's why I created this, to help out people with their season-long rankings. So these do change and update every couple of days, just to let you know. So to give you an idea here, Le'Veon Bell is at the top of the list. He still is and going to be, I wouldn't say by far, but the #1 fantasy player throughout the year. So if you're saved by the bell, you've got Le'Veon Bell. And #2, Julio Jones, and proceeding on, Zeke Elliott. Okay, not all these players obviously are top ranked and have the optimal matchups this week. It'll be kind of rare to have that happen, but it will happen at times. So next, don't fall into the chalk trap. And what I mean by that is chalk is simply players, if you're playing a daily fantasy league, players that everybody is playing. Everybody that is looking at trying to get a piece of this, low cost player that put up the previous week 50 points that happened with Rashard Higgins from the Browns. And as you can see now, he's not even on the list this week because, flipping through these players here, even at the bottom, towards the bottom of the list somewhere, this was obviously a player that didn't seize the opportunity. I mean, maybe he did for 1 week, but he didn't turn out to be a consistent player. So don't fall into that chalk trap of playing one of these just one-hit wonders and stay with the guys that really work for you, such as these guys right here, season long. This list goes into the hundreds deep. Okay? So, the next secret, this is #4. Have your backups ready. Anytime you're looking at having your matchup and getting ready to do so, here's the matchup. Option in your Yahoo season-long league is that you never know what injuries will come about. So, for example, here, let's see if we see any. Here's an injury right here. My opponent's got Danny Amendola in there right now as a questionable player. I don't know if he's going to be ready to come back this week. So does he have a player ready to back up, insert in there, already ready to go? Well, let's see. And in fact, he does have a pretty decent option there with Terrell Pryor Sr., who's a very highly ranked player at the beginning of the season, all right, for most people's drafts. So also Nelson Agholor. If he needed to, he could put them in there and have a good week this week. This is actually a different matchup. These are showing all the matchups for the week. Okay. So then, we're looking for best matchups, as we already mentioned and talked about. Yahoo will help you look at who are the best matchups, but I trust in the dashboard as having the most accurate for, actually in particular for DraftKings and FanDuel, the best and most accurate fantasy actual dash rankings versus that opponent. So best matchups, of course, very important. Not everything, but it's important. Also, as touched on, red zone touchdowns. We want to try to determine which players are going to have red zone touchdowns. Now, to find that particular stat, I believe you can go to NFL.com and just sign up if you want to for a free league and go ahead and get set up. Let's see if we can find it real quick. It'll show you where you can go to easily find this information. Red Zone Touchdowns, Fantasy. And that takes a while to load, but because there are not many sites that will have this information for free, you know, the Red Zone Touchdowns is a valuable tool the deeper you go into the season. And as we get with all these statistics, they're very, very valuable information to have, obviously. Okay, research. Looking for red zone. Of course, this is tailored for their own league and own scoring, all this information. So I'm just trying to figure out where the red zone projections or statistics were. Here's something interesting, stat corrections. Let's see what that is. Okay, those are officially NFL stat corrections that may happen as a possibility in your fantasy league. That can happen, obviously, in any league. So these are just experts rankings. So I'm not finding that. Sorry about that. Where the red zone production is. Yeah, there's a lot of information to track here. So just remember, I'll just